What's good, my mutants? It's me, MT, and welcome back to the Heavy Spoiler Show, y'all. With the Fox X-Men about to make their big return to the big screen in Avengers Doomsday, we thought it'd be the perfect time to finish up our breakdowns of the original Fox X-Men trilogy by breaking down X-Men The Last Stand from 2006, the first movie to tackle the beloved Dark Phoenix saga from the Marvel Comics. So, let's make like the Juggernaut and just break this thing on down, my nerd babies. With a budget of $210 million, X-Men The Last Stand would become known as the most expensive movie of its time. A movie that would go on to gross $460.4 million at the box office, making it the most lucrative X-Men movie of the franchise up until that point, as the previous film made $407.7 million, which is around $53 million less. And even though the first two X-Men movies were directed by certified creepo Bryan Singer, X-Men The Last Stand would switch things up by being directed by Brett Ratner, another creepo. And there are two reasons for this: Bryan Singer's shitty behavior while directing the previous X-Men films, as well as the pettiness of former 20th Century Fox CEO Tom Rothman. Apparently, Bryan Singer wasn't exactly the easiest person to work with in previous movies and clashed hardcore with some of the main cast, especially Storm actress Halle Berry, who was pretty fed up with Bryan Singer's unprofessional use of drugs on set. So much so that she was straight up not interested in working with him at all for an X-Men sequel. Not only this, but Singer would also routinely waste the time of set designers who would bust their ass creating sets that Singer would just randomly write out of the movie as he went on, causing the cost of production to balloon constantly. But on top of all of that, former Fox CEO Tom Rothman just really didn't like the X-Men franchise at all and hated that the movies were received so well by audiences, despite him predicting that both the previous movies would flop hard. So because of that and Singer's bad reputation, Rothman would put off the X-Men 3 production by pushing back the signing of Singer's contract for a third film. However, because of this, Warner Brothers would see that Bryan Singer was single and ready to mingle and scoop his ass up to direct a Superman movie, with that Superman film eventually becoming the critically mixed Superman Returns film from 2006. However, when Tom Rothman found out about Bryan Singer's big Superman deal, bro crashed the hell out hard and even had Bryan Singer kicked out of the Fox studio lot. And because he was extra petty, Rothman would then rush the X-Men 3 production to find a director that could make the X-Men movie before Superman Returns came out. And Bryan Singer would eventually go on to very much deeply regret choosing Superman Returns over the opportunity to conclude his X-Men trilogy his way, especially after seeing how badly X-Men The Last Stand actually turned out. But you will not regret heading on over to HeavySpoilers.shop to pick up some nerdy merch for your bodies. We've got an incredible new full power shirt inspired by Cyclops of the X-Men that you guys can wear while watching Avengers Doomsday. Or you can rep the God Doom himself by wearing our new Emperor shirt inspired by Dr. Doom. We've got all that and so much more over at the Heavy Spoilers merch store, so be sure to visit today. But yeah, Darren Aronofsky, known for the harrowing addiction drama Requiem for a Dream, the Oscar-winning psychological thriller Black Swan, and his breakthrough surreal indie debut Pi, was one of the directors considered. Hugh Jackman himself actually recommended him after finding him pleasant to work with while filming the 2006 movie The Fountain together. And director Alex Proyas was also being heavily considered, but he would immediately reject the idea after going through hell with CEO Tom Rothman during development of his iRobot film. I actually do go into that a bit in my breakdown of iRobot that you guys can watch on this channel anytime when you subscribe. Future Avengers and Avengers Age of Ultron director Joss Whedon could have also gotten the job if his hands weren't already full with working on a Wonder Woman movie that would never actually end up happening. And even though Joss Whedon was a little bit of a creep himself, Whedon would have actually been a fantastic choice for this movie, considering that the whole mutant cure part of the X-Men 3 story was inspired by Whedon's own Gifted storyline from 2004 that spanned astonishing X-Men issues 1 to 6. Peter Berg, known for directing the sports drama Friday Night Lights, the biographical war film Lone Survivor, the superhero action movie Hancock, and the disaster drama Deepwater Horizon, also turned down the opportunity to direct the film, as did Zack Snyder, who was far too busy working on his smash hit 300 to do an X-Men movie. Eventually, the production would manage to secure director Matthew Vaughn for the job. However, Vaughn would end up dropping out for a number of reasons. Not only did Matthew Vaughn not believe that a good X-Men movie could be made in Tom Rothman's rushed timeframe, but he also wasn't a fan of how sneaky and deceptive the Fox executives at the time were being with Storm actress Halle Berry. Apparently, Matthew Vaughn discovered that the Fox executives were planning on tricking Halle Berry into signing onto X-Men 3 by making a fake script, which started with her saving an African village with her superpowers, knowing damn well that they weren't ever going to use that script at all as soon as she was legally obligated to return.
Hollywood is really political and odd, and I went into one of the executives' office and I saw an X3 script, and I immediately knew it was a lot fatter. I was like, what the hell's this draft? He went, don't worry about it. And I was like, no, I'm the director, I'm worrying about this draft, tell me what it is, please. He wouldn't tell me, so I grabbed it, literally it was like a crazy moment, but I grabbed it, opened the first page, and it said, Africa, storm, kids dying of no water, she creates a thunderstorm and saves all these children. Oh, okay, it's a pretty cool idea. What is this? And they went, oh, it's the Halle Berry script. I went, okay, because she hasn't signed up yet. But once this is what she wants it to be, and once she signs up, we'll throw it in the bin. And I was like, wow, you're going to do that to an Oscar-winning actress who plays Storm? I'm out of here. So I quit at that point, because I thought, mincemeat. So that stayed with me, and that made me think, Hollywood, I'm not saying, look, they do some stuff well, but not in my style.
But yeah, as soon as Matthew Vaughn saw that they were going to treat Halle Berry that way, his conscience pushed him to leave the production. And when he did, Tom Rothman crashed out once again, threatening him by saying that he would never work in this town again. But Matthew Vaughn would famously go on to direct beloved films like 2007's Stardust and 2010's Kick-Ass before getting a chance to tackle the X-Men and 2011's X-Men First Class. But yeah, about 6 days after Matthew Vaughn left the production, Fox would end up hiring Brett Ratner for the directing job. And with Singer gone, Halle Berry would eventually sign on to do X3. But her decision to do so was motivated by her career taking a huge hit following her embarrassing appearance in the 2004 Catwoman movie. But yeah, composing the score for this film is composer John Powell, who was known for his awesome work on the Bourne Identity trilogy and recently for both of the Wicked movies. And it was actually because of his work on the Bourne Identity that Brett Ratner chose him to do the music for X-Men The Last Stand. Composer John Ottman was originally tapped to do the music for the movie back when Bryan Singer was thought to be involved, but he ended up working on Superman with Singer instead. And much like the Marvel movies of this time, X-Men The Last Stand begins with a Marvel logo animated with flipping comic book pages. But this time around, most of these comic book pages are from the X-Men story arcs that inspired this third X-Men movie. Mainly Chris Claremont's Dark Phoenix saga from 1980 and Joss Whedon's Gifted story arc from 2004. The movie then brings us to a New York suburb 20 years in the past in the year 1986. And even though this location is made to look like New York, the production actually filmed this scene in Vancouver, Canada. The Grey residence actually resides at 1769 Golf Club Drive in Tsawwassen, British Columbia. And this city is no stranger to paranormal happenings, as the 1995 Jumanji film was also filmed in that city as well. And rolling up in their Mercedes-Benz 600 are a young Charles Xavier and Eric Lenscher. And the scene was actually a bit of cinematic history, as it marks the first time where de-aging visual effects had been used in a major motion picture. The geniuses at Lola Digital Effects used a bunch of younger photographs of Sir Patrick Stewart and Sir Ian McKellen in order to bring the effects to life. And honestly, for 2006, this effect looks pretty damn good and holds up very well to this day. I mean, the effect is still very noticeable by today's standards, but it still looks pretty damn fantastic if you ask me. And as the two walk up to the Grey residence, we can see that Magneto is wearing his favorite hues of red and purple, the same colors as the Magneto costume in the comics. And Charles Xavier is very noticeably walking on feet instead of in a wheelchair. And while we don't exactly know what happened to land Charles Xavier in a wheelchair in this particular cinematic timeline, we do get an explanation for that in 2011's X-Men First Class when we see a bullet deflected by Magneto ricochet into Charles Xavier's body, paralyzing him. The original explanation for Professor Xavier's paralysis came in the pages of Uncanny X-Men issue number 20, and in that issue, it was revealed that an alien supervillain by the name of Lucifer dropped a giant slab of rock onto Xavier's legs when the professor tried to stop him from terrorizing a town in Tibet. But anyways, Charles and Eric then enter the Gray household and meet John and Elaine Gray, the parents of a 12-year-old Jean Grey. John and Elaine made their first appearance in the 5th issue of Uncanny X-Men in 1964, but in that comic and beyond, Jean's mother Elaine actually has blonde hair instead of being a brunette. And we can immediately see that Elaine is the much more empathetic of the two, as she tries to correct her husband when he refers to Jean's mutation as an illness. And I appreciate how the movie also gives Elaine heart-shaped earrings to show her compassionate nature. Professor Xavier and Eric then ask to speak to Jean Grey alone, and when they do, Jean Grey immediately showcases how powerful she is by lifting all the cars in her neighborhood with her telekinetic powers. And in addition to these cars, she also manages to lift the lawnmower of one of her neighbors, with that neighbor being played by famous Dark Phoenix Saga writer Chris Claremont. And right after that, we get another cameo from Cameo King and Marvel god Stan Lee as a neighbor watching the water from his garden hose levitate upwards. Charles then challenges Jean to let them help her control her powers before her powers control her, before we jump forward in time 10 years to around the year 1996. We then see the exterior of Worthington Labs, which is actually the Sheraton Wall Center in Vancouver, British Columbia. And inside, we see a young Warren Worthington III, played by an 11 to 12-year-old Caden Boyd, who famously played the dreaming protagonist in 2005's The Adventure of Shark Boy and Lava Girl.
He ruined my dream journal! I did not! Mr. Electric, send him to the principal's office and have him expelled!
And as most X-Men fans already know, Warren Worthington III, aka Angel, is actually one of the original members of the X-Men that were introduced in X-Men number 1 in 1963, alongside Scott Summers' Cyclops, Jean Grey Marvel Girl, Bobby Drake Iceman, and Hank McCoy Beast. And even though Angel does make his live-action debut in this X-Men movie, the character almost made an appearance in the previous movie, X2 X-Men United, as one of William Stryker's prisoners. If one of the discarded versions of the X2 script came true, we could have seen William Stryker and his people transform Angel into his darker Archangel persona with metallic wings. Something that was originally done by the Omega-class mutant Apocalypse in X-Factor issue number 23, when Warren became his Horseman of Death. Warren's father, Warren Worthington II, starts knocking on the bathroom door, wondering what his maturing preteen son has been doing in there for over an hour. And when he busts down the door, he quickly discovers that puberty has caused his son to furiously tug his growing body parts with various instruments. And by growing body parts, I of course mean his wings growing on his back. This scene was actually one of Matthew Vaughn's ideas back when he was involved with the production that Brett Ratner decided to preserve in the final cut of the film. Then after the intro cinematic, we are brought to the present day where the X-Men attempt to learn teamwork in their ultra-advanced battle simulation room, famously known as the Danger Room. And one of the first images that we see is Aurora Monroe, aka Storm, flying into frame. And because Halle Berry didn't really get to do any flying scenes as Storm in the previous films, one of her main stipulations for doing this movie was that her character have a series of flying moments. And even though she would get exactly what she wanted, Halle Berry would soon discover that some of the flying stunts that they had in store for her would make her crazy nauseous, to the point where she literally threw up from spinning around so much like we see Storm do during the big showdown at the Gray household a little bit later on in the movie. And right after this, we are reintroduced to Daniel Cudmore's Colossus, as he protects Anna Paquin's Rogue from incoming debris by having her absorb his ability to cover himself in organic steel. And in order to save money on CG, the production would actually choose to make Colossus's look practically by making a shiny reflective suit for him. I mean, they did go the all CG route for X2 X-Men United, but decided to switch things up this time around. And speaking of saving money on expensive X-Men from the previous film, it is not hard to notice that fan-favorite X-Men hero Nightcrawler is 100% absent this time around, despite having seemingly joined the X-Men team at the end of the last film. Even though the production initially planned for Alan Cumming to have a small cameo in this movie, they felt like the money, time, and energy needed to bring Nightcrawler to life just was not worth it. So they just wrote his Smurf looking ass out of the film entirely, which sucks. But anyways, directly after this, we watch Bobby Drake, aka Iceman, use his frost powers to save Kitty Pryde from a missile before Kitty Pryde returns the favor by using her phasing powers to force a missile to go right through the both of them, as a jealous rogue watches from afar. And while this is actor Shawn Ashmore's third time playing the role of Iceman in the Fox X-Men trilogy, this would be Elliot Page's first time as X-Men Kitty Pryde. After watching Elliot Page in the 2005 psychological thriller Hard Candy, Brett Ratner knew that the actor would be the perfect choice for Kitty Pryde, even going as far as to call Page himself after they rejected their offer to play the part. However, Elliot Page would grow to regret that decision, as he truly hated working with director Brett Ratner throughout the entire production. Mostly because Brett Ratner was kind of a dick and would say a bunch of rude and homophobic shit to Elliot on set, which is a huge bummer. And before Elliot Page was cast as Kitty Pryde, actresses Eliza Dushku, Summer Glau, and Maggie Grace auditioned for the role as well, with Maggie Grace eventually briefly being cast as Kitty before the production decided that she was a little bit too old to play the character. In the previous X-Men films, actress Sumela Kay played Kitty in the first X-Men movie, while actress Katie Stewart would play Kitty in X2 X-Men United, but both of those roles were pretty much just background characters. And with the X-Men absolutely failing to work as a team, Wolverine would decide to take matters into his own hands by asking Colossus to throw him at their unseen enemy, a move that has come to be known as Logan's famous fastball special ever since it first debuted in Uncanny X-Men issue number 100 from 1976. Wolverine does his slicing and dicing off screen before it's revealed that the X-Men have been fighting a giant simulation of a Sentinel, the infamous mutant hunting machines from the X-Men comics created by Bolivar Trask in the pages of 1965's Uncanny X-Men number 14. And it's kind of weird how the Sentinels show up for the first time in this universe as a Danger Room simulation before actually appearing as threats created by Bolivar Trask in X-Men Days of Future Past, but I still appreciate the reference nonetheless. And speaking of the Danger Room, apparently if Brian Peter File Singer got to direct this movie instead of Brett Ratner, he apparently would have shown Scott Summers taking the initiative to build the Danger Room himself, specifically as a result of losing Jean Grey in the previous movie. Jean's loss would have pushed Scott to make the X-Men better, so we didn't have to suffer a major loss like that again. And speaking of Scott, the movie then transitions to him grieving the loss of Jean Grey alone in his bedroom before he experiences images of a drowning Jean calling out to him from Alkali Lake. And what's particularly interesting about this moment is how the production seemed to purposely put a painting of a red ocean behind Cyclops' bed and head, like a symbolic piece of foreshadowing towards his own demise at Alkali Lake at the hands of the red-haired Phoenix. And in response to this vision, Cyclops leaves the mansion to head towards the lake, ignoring Wolverine's attempts to encourage him to move on. And after this, we are shown the exterior of the Department of Mutant Affairs, which is actually an office building at 1075 West Georgia Street in Vancouver, British Columbia in real life. And if you're a fan of the Arrow TV series, the rooftop battle from the second episode of season 1 was also filmed at this building. And inside the Department of Mutant Affairs is Dr. Hank McCoy, the X-Man known as Beast and Secretary of Mutant Affairs. This is the first time the role of Beast will be played by actor Kelsey Grammer of Frasier fame, with Hank McCoy actually appearing in a quick cameo on TV in X2 X-Men United as played by actor Steve Basic. Much like I mentioned in my heavy spoilers breakdown of that movie, Kelsey Grammer was actually so enthused about the idea of portraying Beast that he actually went through the audition process for it, something that Grammer rarely ever did at that point in his career. Grammer was actually cast in the movie back when Matthew Vaughn was director, and Brett Ratner decided to keep him on when Vaughn left. Matthew Vaughn was also responsible for the casting of juggernaut actor Vinnie Jones as well. But before Kelsey Grammer's casting, actor Jason Fleming was heavily considered to play Beast when his buddy Matthew Vaughn was going to direct the project, but that never ended up panning out. But luckily, Matthew Vaughn would get a chance to work with Fleming on an X-Men movie when he got to direct X-Men First Class years later, casting Fleming in the role of the teleporting Azazel. Afterwards, actor Sam Neill of Jurassic Park fame was apparently cast as Beast at one point, but had to drop out of the film due to other commitments. But yeah, as Beast hangs upside down from his ceiling, he holds a real-life copy of the October 2005 edition of Scientific American magazine, with the article tracking mutations by writer Dennis Draina very likely being the focus of Beast's attention. And we can also see that Beast has green eyes in this movie, which differs from Nicholas Holt's Beast that would be introduced in 2011's X-Men First Class, which shows Beast with yellow eyes instead. My blue eyes, white dragon. Sorry. And in order to achieve the look of Beast, Kelsey Grammer had to sit in the production's makeup chair for about 2.5 to 3 hours. But luckily, the makeup removal process was much shorter at just 45 minutes. And as Beast's secretary informs him of a meeting, we can see the logo for the Department of Mutant Affairs in the background, which features a bald eagle above an American flag shield that also has a DNA double helix on it to represent the mutant genome. Beast then heads to the meeting hosted by the unnamed President of the United States, played by actor Joseph Summer, an actor that previously worked with Brett Ratner in the Family Man film that he directed in the year 2000. And at the beginning of X2 X-Men United, the president was a different man known as President McKenna, played by Carter Smith, but there appears to have been an election between now and then. Also at the meeting is the infamous X-Men villain Bolivar Trask, played by actor Bill Duke. And when the character was first introduced in X-Men issue number 14, Trask is a Caucasian man with an extensive background in robotics, a background that eventually led him to create the Master Mold machine that cranked out an army of mutant hunting sentinels. But in this particular live-action X-Men timeline, this Trask is just the head of the Department of Homeland Security, who was recently duplicated by the X-Men villain Mystique before she was captured and interrogated. Actress Rebecca Romijn returns as Raven Darkholme, aka Mystique, but her role was greatly diminished this time around in comparison to previous movies, mostly because of prior commitments to other projects and her growing family. And while Mystique still has her piercing yellow eyes, what's different this time around is that her eyes are completely computer generated, which was a huge relief for Rebecca after suffering with super uncomfortable and irritating yellow contacts in the previous 2 films. However, even though Rebecca Romijn's eyes were comfortable, Rebecca herself wasn't exactly comfortable working with Brett Ratner, and would later go on record to say that she was thankful that the director got publicly canceled during the height of the Me Too movement. But anyways, as the movie transitions to Mystique's interrogation, she mocks the interviewer by transforming into Magneto, the very magnetic madman that they were all searching for. And on Mystique Magneto's chest is the number 0001, which likely refers to X-Men issue 1, which featured the first appearance of Magneto along with the OG X-Men. And after witnessing Mystique assault her interrogator, the president and his staff then transitioned to the real matter at hand, the intel that Mystique was trying to steal from the FDA regarding a young mutant named Jimmy, aka Leech. Introduced in 1983's Uncanny X-Men No. 179, Leech has the power to deactivate any mutant power, much like we see in this movie. However, unlike this film, comic book Leech has slightly deformed green skin that very much alienated him from the rest of society. But for some reason, Brett Ratner decided to just make him look like a bald white boy, played by actor Cameron Bright. Recently, there was actually a reference to the character Leech in one of the latest trailers for Insomniac's new Wolverine video game, where he is pictured in all of his green-skinned glory. Beast then learns that Worthington Labs has used Leech's DNA to manufacture a cure before the movie brings us to Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters. The production would return to Hatley Castle in Colwood, British Columbia, Canada to film the X-Mansion scenes, much like they did in X2 X-Men United. And this mansion was also the same mansion used for the Smallville TV show for Lex Luthor's home. We then hear the voice of Charles Xavier as he says the following.
When an individual acquires great power, the use or misuse of that power is everything. Will it be for the greater good, or will it be used for personal or for destructive ends?
This very much feels like a shout out to the Marvel character Spider-Man and his Uncle Ben's famous "with great power, there must also come great responsibility" mantra.
Remember, with great power comes great responsibility.
Along with Kitty Pryde, other notable mutants in Xavier's classroom during this scene include the sonic screaming Siren to the left of Kitty, played by Shauna Kane, the energy-producing Jubilee to the right of Kitty, played by Kia Wong, and the technology-controlling Jones on the far right, played by Connor Widows. And sitting behind Jones is the fork-tongued Artie Maddox, played by Bryce Hodgson. And all 4 of these actors are reprising the roles that they played in X2 X-Men United. The professor then shows the class some footage of his colleague Moya McTaggart, a love interest of Charles Xavier in the comics that made her first appearance in 1975's X-Men issue number 96. And even though the character is very much Scottish in the comics, she is played by British actress Olivia Williams in this movie before the role will be taken over by Australian actress Rose Byrne in the First Class timeline. And behind Moira is actually Professor Xavier's brain-dead twin brother, and it's never revealed what his first name is, but we know that it starts with the letter P. Xavier then introduces the idea of transferring one's consciousness into into a brain-dead body like the one on the TV screen, very much foreshadowing what Professor Xavier would do to cheat death in the movie's post-credits scene. And after class, Professor Xavier meets up with a Storm who is tired of hiding in the shadows, waiting for humanity to accept mutants. And as they talk in the hallways of the school, we can actually see the mutant Helion using telekinesis on some paper airplanes. Introduced in 2003's New Mutants issue number 2, Julian Keller, aka Helion, is eventually revealed to be an Omega-level mutant with extremely powerful telekinetic abilities as well as some light telepathy. But in the comics, whenever Helion uses his telekinesis, a green energetic aura usually surrounds whatever he is manipulating. Also, walking behind Storm and Xavier are a group of young female triplets. These are of course the Stepford Cuckoo sisters, genetic children of the mutant Emma Frost after some scientist creepo stole 1,000 of Emma's eggs in the comics. There were originally 5 of these telepathic Cuckoo sisters when they first made their debut in 2001's New X-Men 118, but eventually 2 of the sisters, Sophie and Esme, would die, leaving only Irma, Phoebe, and Celeste alive. Xavier then brings up the idea of Storm taking over as leader of the school if he ever were to pass away, a role that would have gone to Scott if he didn't let Jean's death change him so much. 1980's X-Men issue number 139 is when we first see Storm become deputy leader of the X-Men following Cyclops taking a brief leave of absence from the team. The 2 of them are then surprised by a sudden visit from Hank McCoy, who is looking at a painting of the Grand Canal in Venice, Italy when they enter the room. Beast then tells Xavier, Storm, and Wolverine about Worthington Labs' mutant cure before the movie brings us to Worthington Labs' Alcatraz facility, which of course used to be a famous prison island before it was shut down in 1963. And as Warren Worthington II presents the mutant cure to the world, we can see Dr. Kavita Rao sitting behind him, played by Iranian actress Shohreh Aghdashloo, despite the character very much being of Indian descent when the character first appeared in Joss Whedon's Astonishing X-Men number 1 from 2004. Back when Matthew Vaughn was directing the project, he would actually cast Shohreh as a completely different character named Dr. Cecilia Reyes. Introduced in 1997's X-Men issue number 65, Dr. Cecilia Reyes is a medical doctor with the mutant power to project protective force fields around her body, eventually becoming a member of both the X-Men and X-Factor teams. But when Brett Ratner took over directing duties, he would recast her as Dr. Kavita Rao. Other actresses the production were considering for the role of Dr. Rao include Bollywood actresses Tabu Fatima Hashmi and Shabana Azmi. And as all the students in the X-Mansion watch the press conference, Rogue gets excited about the idea of finally being able to touch her boyfriend that she immediately heads to Xavier's office to see if the news is for real. But while Storm tries to assure her that her mutation isn't actually a disease that needs to be cured, Rogue doesn't exactly seem to buy it. And even though Rogue was very enthusiastic about the idea of taking this mutant cure, Rogue actress Anna Paquin wasn't as jazzed about the idea and tried her best to get the production to reverse their decision, but ultimately it would be to no avail. Meanwhile, angered at the announcement, a group of mutants hold a 7 p.m. meeting at Holy Trinity Church to discuss how they should react. And remember that scene from X2 X-Men United where Storm and Jean Grey first run into Nightcrawler? This is actually the very same church from that scene, St. Andrew's Wesley United Church in Vancouver to be exact. This church is actually right across the street from Sheraton Wall Center, where they shot the Worthington Lab exteriors. And as a mutant man calls for the mutant community to be civil by forming a committee to talk to the government, a reptilian mutant crawling on the wall behind him watches from above. And while this mutant is credited as Lizard Man in this film, in the comics, his real name was actually Victor Borkowski before adopting the mutant name Anole, after the Iguanian lizard. And even though he ends up joining Magneto's Brotherhood of Mutants in this movie, in the comics, he actually joins the X-Men as a good guy. Anole makes his first appearance in 2003's New Mutants number 2, just in case you guys were curious.
Thanks for the good news!
And also in the audience is Big William Robert Riley, also known as the mutant Fat with a PH. Originally a body fat manipulating Caucasian mutant when he was first introduced in 2001's X-Force 117, in this movie the big version of the character is played by Samoan actor Via Saliamua, while the smaller version of the character is played by Chinese actor Richard Ye. Richard Ye also played the Ninja Turtle Donatello in the short-lived Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles The Next Mutation TV series. And interrupting the speaker is a woman with purple highlights in her hair who claims that the humans are planning to exterminate them. And while it's kind of hard to believe, this woman is actually supposed to be the mutant Psylocke, even though she barely has any of the powers of her comic book counterpart. This version of Psylocke only has the ability to teleport through shadows, an ability that comic book Psylocke would not acquire until X-Men issue number 338 in 1996 as a result of drinking a shadow elixir called the Crimson Dawn. Before then, comic book Psylocke was mainly known as a powerful telepathic and telekinetic ninja with energy projecting abilities, all attributes pretty much absent from this take of the character. And there's actually a big reason for this. That character wasn't actually meant to be Psylocke at all when it was first created. It was only much later on in production that somebody decided to just name the character Psylocke, which is kind of super random and careless in my opinion. Like, Psylocke is a pretty damn important and badass character in the comics, so to not give much thought as to how such a character would be introduced in live action for the first time is kind of disrespectful in my opinion. But anyway, Psylocke and Fat are part of a gang of mutant outcasts known as the Omegas, a group heavily based on the Morlocks from the X-Men comics. And much like how the mutant Callisto was the head of the Morlocks in the comics, we see Callisto as the leader of the Omegas in this movie, a group that she reps with a big ol' Omega symbol on her chest. However, though she shares the name of the leader of the comic book Morlocks, her power set is a little bit different. When Callisto was first introduced in 1983's Uncanny X-Men 169, comic book Callisto's powers consisted of having all 5 of her senses cranked up to 11, making her an incredibly formidable hunter. However, in this movie, Callisto inexplicably has super speed like Quicksilver, as well as the ability to detect the power level of mutants around her like the mutant Caliban. And this would not be the only superhero role for Callisto actress Dania Ramirez, as a year later, she would play a superhuman with deadly poison powers named Maya Herrera in NBC's Heroes TV series. Next to Callisto to the left is Philippa Sontag, also known as the mutant Arclight, played by actress and model Omaira Moda. And much like her comic book counterpart, Arclight has the ability to generate seismic shockwaves with her body. However, when she first appeared in the pages of 1986's Uncanny X-Men 211, she was actively working to destroy the Morlocks as part of a group called the Marauders. But here, she's essentially part of the Morlocks since the Omegas were based off of the Morlocks. And back when Matthew Vaughn was working on the movie, the character Arclight wasn't included in the film at all. In her place, Matthew Vaughn wanted to introduce the pheromone manipulating mutant Stacy X, introduced in the pages of 2001's Uncanny X-Men 399. Stacy X has the power to project her own pheromones into the air in order to affect the body chemistry of others, making them feel however way she wants, whether that be happy, nauseous, dizzy, aroused, or even hopped up on adrenaline. And before Dania Ramirez was ultimately cast as Callisto, she initially went in for the role of Stacy X, but then the production decided to give that role to Omaira Moda, before changing their minds again and making Moda's character Arclight, Xing out Stacy from the script for good. And standing 2 rows back to the right of Psylocke is Robert Herman, also known as Glob Herman, whose body is completely made out of transparent wax. This Glob Herman looks a lot different from the giant pink mutant with a visible skeleton that was introduced in 2001's X-Men 117. But adapting that character faithfully would have undoubtedly cost the production a lot of money in VFX. And also part of the Omegas is the mutant Ash, who we see shortly after Psylocke's outburst, played by actor Mark Helfrich. With skin composed of burning charcoal, Ash has the ability to incinerate people and objects by shooting out burning charcoal out of his mouth. And as far as I can tell, Ash is an original character created for this movie. Ash and the other Omegas then listen as Magneto warns them that humanity would inevitably seek their extermination, much like Hitler sought the extermination of various peoples during the Holocaust. And because of that, Magneto attempts to rally as many in the meeting to his mutant brotherhood. Unconvinced, a mutant by the name of Quill attempts to talk down to Magneto before Pyro threatens him with a toasting if he doesn't back off. Quill, whose real name is Maxwell Jordan and has the power to generate porcupine-like quills on his body, is played by actor Ken Leung, famous for roles like Detective Singh in the Saw movies and Sang in the Rush Hour movies. And he would later go on to play the Marvel character Karnak in the absolutely ass Inhumans TV series later on. Callisto then approaches Magneto right afterwards and flexes her mutant powers before Magneto asks her to attempt to locate Mystique for him, who is currently being transported by the government in a heavily guarded truck. Meanwhile, Beast makes a visit to the Alcatraz facility of Worthington Labs. There, Dr. Rao escorts him to meet Little Jimmy, who is playing the Xbox 360 port of the 2004 game Pitfall: The Last Expedition when Beast enters the room, specifically the Jungle Canyon level of Pitfall. Later on in the movie, when we see a family playing video games in a car on the Golden Gate Bridge, we can see that they're also playing Pitfall: The Lost Expedition. But in that instance, they're playing the Renegade headquarters level of that game. And also in Jimmy's room is a white Roboraptor toy made by Wowie Toys, showing off his love of dinosaurs. Beast marvels at the boy's abilities before the movie transitions to Scott riding his Harley-Davidson V-Rod 1130 to Alkali Lake, the place where his former lover Jean Grey was thought to have been crushed by the weight of the lake's waters, attempting to save her friends. Brett Ratner would actually go on to purchase Cyclops' bike at the end of filming. And honestly, I don't blame him, because who else is going to use it? Scott? That motherfucker's dead as hell. Well, not quite yet, because Scott has to shoot his optic blast at the lake first, like the drama queen that he is. But that blast seems to activate the lady lying in the lake, leading Jean Grey to emerge from the lake reborn. And excited that his dead girlfriend is back, Scott eventually gives her a big ol' smooch. But that smooch would unfortunately be the kiss of death for old Scotty Four Eyes, as we can literally see the Phoenix suck the life out of him from his face. And the reason for James Marsden's quick death in this movie is directly tied to director Bryan Singer and his work on Superman Returns, as Singer would cast Marsden in the role of Lois Lane's fiancé, Richard White. So Marsden could not stick around for both superhero productions at the same time. Sensing Scott's demise, Xavier sends Storm and Wolverine to Alkali Lake in the X-Jet, a vehicle that has been a staple of the X-Men ever since it debuted in giant-sized X-Men #1, alongside mutants Storm, Colossus, Nightcrawler, and Thunderbird. And when the two of them head to the shore, Wolverine finds Cyclops' custom Oakley penny sunglasses telekinetically floating in the air right before discovering Jean Grey herself. The two then rush Jean to the X-Mansion's infirmary, where Professor Xavier theorizes that the Phoenix may have manifested a telekinetic cocoon around Jean in order to keep her safe from the weight of the lake. And this idea of a cocoon protecting Jean Grey was introduced in Avengers 263 from 1985, when the Avengers discovered that the Phoenix cocooned Jean Grey underneath Jamaica Bay in New York. Professor Xavier then goes on to inform Logan of how the root of Jean Grey's mutation has always been the Phoenix. And because Xavier felt the Phoenix entity was too powerful for a little girl to control, he isolated the Phoenix behind several psychic barriers within Jean's mind, effectively creating a dual personality within Jean Grey's host body that is similar to dissociative identity disorder, a disorder that Jean Grey actress Famke Janssen did her homework on in order to play both characters effectively. And this is significantly different to how the Phoenix operates in the comics, as the Phoenix was originally a cosmic entity that merged with Jean Grey while she was pushing her powers to the limit, attempting to save her friends in Uncanny X-Men 101. And Jean Grey actress Famke Janssen really was not a fan of Brett Ratner's take on Jean throughout the movie, and was super let down that the film was not a faithful adaptation of the beloved Dark Phoenix story arc from the comics. And one of the main reasons why the Dark Phoenix story was presented so awfully in this movie was because the Fox executives at the time wanted to prioritize the mutant cure story instead, making the whole Dark Phoenix subplot a little bit of an afterthought. But yeah, Wolverine gets angry at Professor Xavier for caging Jean Grey's mind before the movie transitions to Worthington Labs, where Ben Foster's Warren Worthington III arrives to be the first mutant to take the mutant cure in order to make his father happy. And this is actually the second time actor Ben Foster would star in a Marvel movie after appearing in the 2004 Punisher movie alongside Mystique actress Rebecca Romijn. And before Ben Foster got the role of Angel, actors Jed Bernard and Nick Stahl auditioned for the chance to play Angel. Ultimately, actor Mike Vogel would get the role, but eventually would have to leave the project because it got in the way of his work on the 2006 film Poseidon, where he played the arrogant Chris Sanders. This would lead Ben Foster to landing the job as the high-flying Angel, despite Foster ironically having a significant fear of heights himself, which is kind of funny. But yeah, as Angel gets strapped in for the procedure, Dr. Rao grabs the mutant cure from a box with the characters XM89248 on it. This is an Easter egg of a shout out to Marvel artist and writer Jim Lee, as 1989's Uncanny X-Men issue 248 was the first time Jim Lee got to pencil an Uncanny X-Men comic. However, at the sight of the needle about to pierce his skin, Warren decides to break free and tell his father off before dramatically jumping through an insanely high window to flex his wings for everyone to see. And speaking of Angel's wings, when the production first made the wings for Ben Foster, they were originally much too heavy for the actor to move around in. So to make things easier, they went back to the drawing board and decided to make lighter foam wings instead. Meanwhile, Magneto and his gang assault a prison transport convoy to save Mystique and recruit a few more members for their growing mutant army. And after freeing Mystique, she tells them about little Jimmy No Powers and how getting rid of him is the cure to destroying the mutant cure forever. And right before Magneto frees the next prisoner, Pyro reads that James Madrox, most commonly known as the mutant Multiple Man, resides in cell 41205. Even though the numbers 41209 can clearly be seen written on the door before Magneto rips it off. Played by actor Eric Dane of Charmed and Grey's Anatomy fame, Multiple Man has the ability to generate multiple clones of himself, ever since he first appeared in 1974's giant-sized Fantastic Four #4. And not only that, but he also has the ability to retain the memories of each of the clones when they merge back with his original form, which is kind of cool. And back before 20th Century Fox was bought out by Disney, there were actually plans for a standalone Multiple Man movie starring James Franco in his second Marvel role since starring as Harry Osborn in Raimi's Spider-Man films. But that of course never panned out due to James Franco being cancelled for sexual misconduct. When will men learn to keep their hands to themselves? Never. The sun will explode before that happens, unfortunately. Magneto then frees his next new recruit, the massive, unstoppable Juggernaut. Born Cain Marko, we learn that he's actually the stepbrother of Professor Xavier when the character first appeared in 1965's Uncanny X-Men #12. However, in the comics, Juggernaut isn't actually a mutant like his stepbrother at all, because in X-Men issue #12, we learn how Cain actually got his superpowers after finding a glowing red ruby in the lost Temple of Cyttorak during the Korean War. And after touching that ruby, he was gifted the power of a dark other dimensional being known as Cyttorak, effectively becoming Cyttorak's avatar. That being said, it seems like this movie's version of Juggernaut is based on the Ultimate Universe version of the character introduced in Ultimate X-Men #8 from 2001, as that Cain Marko was a mutant outright. But yeah, Juggernaut actor Vinnie Jones actually hated the Juggernaut costume that they made him wear for this movie because it was so damn uncomfortable. So much so that he would actually decline to cameo in The Void in Deadpool and Wolverine because he didn't want to have to relive the horror of that suit. And after freeing the prisoners, the last guard left attempts to shoot Magneto with a gun loaded with the mutant cure. But Mystique decides to jump in front of the dart's path, completely eradicating the X gene from Mystique's bloodstream. Angered at this, Pyro then cooks that last guard with his fire powers. And speaking of Pyro, actor Aaron Stanford was actually really bummed out that he didn't get to wear a cool supervillain costume over the course of the X-Men trilogy. But luckily, Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios would rectify that in Deadpool and Wolverine by giving him a costume that was inspired by the original Pyro costume that debuted with the character in X-Men 141. And disappointed at the humanity of his former companion, Magneto leaves a naked Raven Darkholme in the truck after kicking her out of the Mutant Brotherhood. Mystique's reduced role in The Last Stand is not just because Rebecca Romijn couldn't stand working with Brett Ratner, it was also linked to her prior commitment to the short-lived WB sitcom Pepper Dennis, where she starred as the lead role. And as a result of the government making guns out of the mutant cure, Beast would then resign from his post as Secretary of Mutant Affairs at the White House before the movie transitions to Jean waking up in the infirmary as Wolverine watches over her, a flip scenario to their first meeting in the first X-Men film. The Phoenix then tries to seduce Wolverine, but Logan realizes that the woman he's making out with isn't the Jean that he fell in love with. And angered that Logan doesn't want to give her an adamantium bone of a different kind, the Phoenix then breaks out of the X-Mansion, but not before Jean Grey briefly emerges, begging for Logan to kill her out of guilt for killing Scotty Four Eyes at the lake. And sensing the Phoenix's awakening, Callisto informs Magneto that a Class 5 mutant with powerful electromagnetic abilities is on the loose. Magneto then asks where she is, even though she never specified a gender. Bro just knew that it could not be anyone but the Phoenix that he met all those years ago at the Grey household. Magneto then meets up with Xavier, Storm, and Wolverine at Jean Grey's family house in New York. And when the two walk in alone, Xavier wheels his ass right on past the Juggernaut, not giving him a second look, seemingly confirming that the two of them have no history as stepbrothers like they do in the comics. And walking through the Grey house, Xavier and Magneto witness objects floating and water boiling, almost like the Phoenix was a giant star with a strong gravitational pull and scorching heat. But all of those powers would be turned against Charles Xavier after his attempts to get Jean to control the Phoenix fail, leading to a bunch of Charles chunks flying all over the Grey family living room.
Oh no! She exploded!
And after Charles Xavier's funeral, Bobby Drake decides to go check up on his not-girlfriend, Kitty Pryde. When said not-girlfriend mentions that she misses being back home, Bobby decides to take this not-girlfriend on an impromptu ice skating date using the fountain at the X-Mansion. And in the comics, Kitty Pryde is originally from Deerfield, Illinois, so it makes sense for her to miss the snow a little bit, even though it does snow in New York. Watching the two of them from afar as they share physical contact is Bobby's actual girlfriend, Rogue, who takes the site as her 13th reason to end her life as a mutant once and for all by taking the mutant cure. Rogue should count herself lucky because in a deleted scene, Bobby and Kitty actually do share a kiss on the ice while Rogue gets big time cucked from a distance. However, Brett Ratner would remove this scene entirely, mostly because he felt like Elliot Page, quote unquote, looked like a 12-year-old next to the adult Bobby and felt like the scene looked a little bit too creepy. And while we're on the subject of this Rogue, Kitty, Bobby love triangle, at some point during production, there were talks of introducing the mutant Gambit to the X-Mansion in order to compete with Iceman for Rogue's love. Actors Josh Holloway, Keanu Reeves, and Channing Tatum were all considered before they scrapped the entire idea. But we all know that Kevin Feige would ultimately give Channing Tatum the chance to play Gambit in Deadpool and Wolverine. And hey, speaking of surprise cameos, the production originally wanted to include Marvel characters like Carol Danvers' Miss Marvel, the original male Captain Marvel, Mar-Vell, along with S.H.I.E.L.D. leader Nick Fury in this movie. But as we all know, the rights to those characters belong solely to Marvel, so they were shit out of luck. But yeah, while Rogue is on her way out of the X-Mansion for good, she runs into Logan, who asks her if she needs a lift, a slight nod towards their first surprise meeting in Logan's truck in the first X-Men film. And instead of trying to stop her, Logan simply encourages her to figure out whether or not she's aiming to take the cure for herself or for Bobby. A little bit later, when Bobby finds Rogue's bedroom completely empty, he asks Pete where she's at, to which he says that Rogue took off. And as many X-Men fans already know, Colossus's original name in the comics is actually Pyotr Rasputin, due to the character originally being from Mother Russia. But in this movie, they very much decided to Americanize the character by just calling him Peter. But of course, the Deadpool movies would introduce a much more comic book accurate take on Colossus, as portrayed by actor Stefan Kapicic. And not long after this, while the X-Men debate whether or not to close the school after Xavier's death, in comes Angel looking for a place to stay, which prompts Storm to assert that Xavier's school for gifted youngsters isn't going anywhere. And it's so weird hearing Beast refer to Angel as a boy as he walks into the school for the first time, considering Warren and Hank were around the same age when they were fighting baddies as part of the OG X-Men in the comics. Soon after this, Logan starts hearing the voice of the hot bird lady, so he decides to steal Scotty Four Eyes' motorcycle yet again to head to the forest to find her. Meanwhile, Pyro, being the flaming bag of shit that he is, decides to fling a flame or two at the mutant curing clinic. Magneto then goes on to the news saying that Pyro's act was just the beginning and tells the rest of humanity to gird up those loins, twin, because war's a-comin'. And in response, the president then orders Bald Black Bolivar to prepare the troops with plastic mutant curing guns. And there was actually a quick deleted scene where they show these plastic guns going into production. Logan eventually arrives at Magneto's mutant camp, which was actually filmed in Canada's Golden Ears Provincial Park in Fern Crescent, Maple Ridge, British Columbia. And this is also where they filmed the home of Caesar's ape colony in 2014's Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, another movie that I broke down on this channel a while back. He immediately runs into prickly Darian Elliott, aka the mutant Spike, who shoots incredibly sharp and deadly spikes out of his body, just like his comic book counterpart. But what's extra interesting about Spike's origins is how he was actually originally black as hell and a completely different dude when he made his first ever appearance in Season 1, Episode 5 of the old X-Men Evolution cartoon. The Spike from that show was actually named Evan Daniels, and he would be revealed as the nephew of the mutant Storm in that particular cartoon universe. Then, a year later, Marvel Comics would take the character of Spike and give him a completely different look and backstory in 2001's X-Force number 121, this time with the birth name Darian Elliott. Logan then goes on a light jog through the forest, slicing up all the mutant resistance in his way, much like the character would to a bunch of soldiers shortly before his death in the 2017 film Logan. Afterwards, Wolverine arrives just in time to see Malcolm X Jean give a rousing speech to his army. And when the rally concludes, Logan tries to meet up with Jean, but Magneto immediately hits him with that Yeetus Wolverinus and sends him flying. And with their camp now compromised, Magneto decides to assault the Alcatraz facility early, leaving the mutant Multiple Man behind to act as a decoy for the government after Raven Darkholme gives up Magneto's location. Magneto then arrives at the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, California, and on the bridge is a pre-production 2007 Mercedes-Benz GL450 with a family inside. Magneto would then come to shuffle some of those cars around and lift the entire Golden Gate Bridge to transport his army to Alcatraz. This moment seems to be inspired by New X-Men 147, where Magneto uses his powers to tear both the Brooklyn and Manhattan bridges apart. And because the city of San Francisco would prohibit the production to film anywhere near the Golden Gate Bridge, they were forced to spend $35 million to recreate a small basketball court-sized section of the Golden Gate Bridge for this scene. And as little Jimmy watches Magneto approach from his cell, we can see him standing on a green-covered bed, likely a slight nod towards Jimmy's green skin in the comic books. And after Magneto successfully drops the bridge onto Alcatraz Island, there was actually supposed to be a deleted scene where Jean Grey seems to empathize with one of the crying girls in the back seat of that Mercedes. A moment that I really wish they kept in the movie because it gives Jean Grey a little bit more agency over the Phoenix. Meanwhile, over at the X-Mansion, the X-Men prepare to do battle with Magneto. Iceman expresses doubt that the six of them could do much to stop Magneto's huge army, but Wolverine gives him a pep talk.
If we don't fight now, everything they stood for will die with them. I'm not gonna let that happen. Are you? Then we stand together. X-Men. All of us.
This moment could have actually played out a lot differently if one of the scenes did not get deleted. Instead of Logan convincing the less experienced X-Men to join the battle, another take of this scene has Logan attempting to convince Iceman, Kitty, and Colossus to stay behind.
They're not coming.
Hey, we've trained for this.
This isn't the danger room, Bobby.
Logan, we're ready to fight.
Fight for what? You better know the answer, because you go to war, you might not come home. She might not come home. You ready for that?
We're not kids anymore. We're X-Men.
What does that mean, apart from the X on your chest?
It means we fight to protect those who
Hate and fear us? Yeah, I heard that one, but it's just words.
No, that's not what it means. It means we're a family, all of us. And we fight as one or not at all. That's what it means.
You have no idea what's waiting out there. Magneto's got an army this time.
And Jean.
His powers have limits. Hers do not. If we don't stop them now, then nobody can.
Well then. Seems to me you need all the help you can get.
Okay, let's go.
The X-Men soon arrive to Magneto's shit show in the X-Jet, and at the sight of all this violence, Beast says this.
Oh, my stars and garters.
"Oh my stars and garters" is of course an iconic catchphrase of Hank's ever since he first used it in the pages of Avengers 137. And fun fact, this line would not be in the movie at all if it wasn't for the movie's executive producer and future head of Marvel Studios, Kevin Feige, who strongly felt like it should be said at least once by the character. The X-Men then hop off the X-Jet to join the battle. Storm flies into the air about to use her powers on a bunch of enemies, but she is quickly tackled by Callisto. And it's kind of a bummer that that happened because in a deleted scene, Storm was originally supposed to summon a gigantic wave against Magneto's forces before shocking them with lightning. The production actually did delete a few badass moments from this big battle. At one point, Beast was supposed to snap somebody's neck, and Iceman and Colossus were supposed to work together to brutally shatter the massive mutant Fat. And meanwhile, as Juggernaut attempts to ram through the walls of the facility in search of Jimmy, Kitty Pryde uses her wall-phasing powers to chase after him, and eventually phases him into the floor. This of course leads to the Juggernaut saying his iconic line,
"Don't you know who I am? I'm the Juggernaut, bitch!"
Brett Ratner actually included this line in the movie as a reference to the popular internet video created by Xavier Nazario and Randy Hayes in 2005.
Yeah, it's the Juggernaut, bitch! Yeah, Charles, I'll beat the shit out you. Get off me, bitch. Who the fuck are you? What the fuck is wrong with you? I'm the Juggernaut, bitch!
And another deleted moment happens shortly after Kitty meets up with Jimmy in his room and the two prep for the Juggernaut's arrival. Because in that deleted scene, when Juggernaut busts through the wall, he says the words, "Here's Juggy," as a nod to Jack Nicholson's famous line from The Shining.
Stay close, alright? Okay.
Here's Juggy. Here's Johnny.
But since the Juggernaut forgot that Jimmy's powers make his powers useless, the giant penis head ends up knocking himself out. Outside, Iceman and Pyro have themselves a Dragon Ball Z inspired clash of powers before Wolverine orders another fastball special from Colossus to be aimed at Magneto. But Magneto quickly seizes Wolverine before realizing too late that Logan was just Hank McCoy's decoy and getting stabbed with several mini vials of the mutant cure. And with Magneto down, the Phoenix then starts a massive wave of destruction, forcing all the mutants and soldiers on the island to evacuate, except for Logan, who believes that he is the only one who can stop the Phoenix, which is straight up not true considering that there's a bald white boy only a few feet away from him that could have done it no problem. They literally could have just had Colossus do a cue ball special and tossed his Caillou-looking ass at the Phoenix to deactivate her powers before hitting her with the mutant cure. Just saying. But that of course would not be as dramatic as Wolverine having his skin peeled off while making his way to Jean, exposing his adamantium skeleton in the process. Wolverine then tells Jean that he loves her before piercing her with his adamantium claws, killing her. Not exactly the kind of penetration the Phoenix wanted when they almost got it on in the infirmary, but hey, beggars can't be choosers. And then the movie ends with Scott and Jean being buried next to the professor, and Rogue returning to the school completely cured of her mutant powers, which is super whack in my opinion, but I'm glad that she's happy. They also filmed another take of this scene where she tells Bobby that she was not able to go through with the process because she's happy the way that she is, a moment that I felt would have been much fitting for the overall tone of the third act.
You're back.
I couldn't do it. I'm sorry, Bobby. This is me.
Welcome home, Rogue.
And after this, we see Storm welcoming all the students back for a new year of school before we see Wolverine watching Hank McCoy accept his new position as US Ambassador to the United Nations. A deleted scene was shot where Hank does not become an ambassador at all, but stays at the Xavier school to be a teacher alongside Storm and Wolverine.
Classroom size could be a problem.
Hey.
And in a similar vein, while the movie ends with Logan staying at the school as well, a deleted scene was also shot of Logan returning back to Alberta, Canada, and revisiting the very same bar that we first saw him in the first movie.
Heard a noise. Thought it might be an animal. I remember you.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And even though there isn't any footage, apparently the production also filmed a scene where the mutant Pyro makes his way back to the Xavier school. But I'm glad that they removed it because after everything Pyro did, I don't think he would fit well with the Xmen because dude was straight up a murderer, man. Then right before the credits, we see Eric sitting alone in a park in San Francisco, playing a game of chess all by himself, now that his favorite chess partner, Charles Xavier, got himself exploded. And why he isn't locked up for his crimes, the world may never know. But we soon find out that the mutant cure may not have been as effective as Worthington Labs hoped, because right before the credits hit, Magneto is able to move a Black Queen chess piece with his powers, alluding to more Magneto shenanigans to come. And then, of course, after the credits, we see the consciousness of Charles Xavier awaken inside of the body of his brain-dead twin brother as he says hello to a surprised Moira McTaggart on Muir Island. Introduced in 1977's Uncanny X-Men issue 104, Muir Island is located not far from Scotland and is home to the Mutant Research Center, which Dr. Moira McTaggart founded herself. The island was actually referenced in X2 X-Men United on one of William Stryker's computers. And also mentioned on Stryker's computers is Moira McTaggart's Omega-level mutant son, Kevin McTaggart, who has the ability to warp reality as he sees fit. Moira would actually decide to create the Mutant Research Center so she could understand and help her son better. And it's kind of a shame that we never got to see Kevin in action at any point during the trilogy, but I'm sure the MCU will get to him eventually. But anyways, that is it for this breakdown of X-Men: The Last Stand. Let us know what you guys think of the movie in the comment section down below. But like always, you guys can follow me at Mastertainment on YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Instagram, wherever I am on the internet. But most importantly, follow Heavy Spoilers here on YouTube by hitting that like button and even hitting that subscribe button if you guys enjoyed the video. But like always, I've been MT, you guys have been amazing, and I'll catch you mutants later. Bye.